For them to make that legendary left-hand turn onto Boylston. Had a lot of close finishes in this race.
April 15th, 2019 was the 123rd running of the Boston Marathon.
Stride for stride to the finish line. Who will take the win in Boston? As the city of Boston rises to its feet and welcomes to the finish line a new champion in 2019. Worknesh Dagefa wins the Boston.
Notice the victors are given laurel wreaths.
Traditions that date back to the early days of the race. I think, for athletes to receive the laurel wreath here adds an even extra special moment to the victory that they've achieved.
He becomes a Boston Marathon champion and gets to hear his national anthem.
The national anthem of Kenya.
Lawrence Cherono of Kenya won the men's 2019 Boston Marathon in his debut. Interestingly enough, the name Lawrence comes from the Latin Laurentus and Laurus, which means laurel, a reference to the laurel wreath, the symbol for victory. I'm sure by now you see how Lawrence, being the victor at the Boston Marathon, connects back to Lauren London, whose name also means laurel, and whose boyfriend was Nipsey Hussle, who had a clothing store called The Marathon and released an album called Victory Lap. But before we go any deeper into this year's victor of the Boston Marathon, Lawrence Cherono, let's take a look back at the man who won the Boston Marathon in 2014, 1 year after the Boston bombing took place. His name is Meb Keflezighi, and like Nipsey Hussle, he is from Eritrea.
But an American took the lead. It was 38-year-old Meb Keflezighi, whose family had emigrated from Eritrea when Meb was 11.
Well, I just found out what my name mean. It mean God will rise. And I found out through one of my homegirls. She just asked me, like, what does your name mean? I couldn't tell her, Not my rap name, my real name.
Yeah.
And my real name is Ermias.
Okay.
It's from East Africa, it's from Eritrea. And so I didn't really...
Running with the names of the 4 bombing victims written on his racing bib, Meb never surrendered the lead.
So here we have a man from Eritrea, which is closely connected to Ethiopia, who wins the victory lap at the marathon in Boston, and a rapper from Eritrea who has a clothing store called the Marathon Store and an album called Victory Lap, who was executed at the age of 33 like Yehoshua and presented to the masses as a false messiah by people like Jermaine Dupri, who called Nipsey Jesus in a tweet. The name Meb is short for Mebratam, meaning let there be light, a reference to the words spoken by the Most High in Genesis chapter 1 verse 3. However, we know that Freemasons use the word light as a reference to Lucifer, the light bearer. It is important to note that Ethiopia has already produced another false messiah figure in their former emperor, Haile Selassie. Notice Meb showed up to this year's Boston Marathon wearing the New England Patriots jersey, which connects him to this year's Super Bowl winners, their eerie connection to the number 666 and the Antichrist. Notice a guy wearing one of Nipsey Hussle's marathon hoodies takes a picture with Meb. at the Boston Marathon. The logo for the Boston Marathon is a white horse with one horn or a unicorn upon its forehead. This is a symbol for the Antichrist, since we know Revelation chapter 6 verse 2 describes the Antichrist as a rider on a white horse who goes forth conquering and to conquer. Remember, the word victor means to conquer. Previously, we talked about how Nipsey Hussle's killer, Eric Holder, is connected to O.J. Simpson in the white Bronco through his lawyer, Christopher Darden.
This is AC. I have O.J. in the car. Okay, where are you? Please, I'm coming up the 5 freeway. Okay. Right now, we are okay, but you gotta tell the police to just back off. He's still alive, but he got a gun to his head.
We also discussed Obama's connection to the rider on the white horse from his speech at Invesco Field, the home of the Denver Broncos, which has Thunder, the Broncos mascot, standing high atop the stadium. In reference to the unicorn or little horn, Daniel chapter 9 describes the Antichrist in this manner. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. By now, I'm sure you can recognize that there are powerful demonic forces at work in our world right now that, shall I say, are hell-bent on bringing forth the conclusion of the Antichrist's marathon or race to the end, to make this year, 2019, his victory lap, and to crown him with the laurel wreath as King of the world, to be worshipped as the risen Messiah by all who are not covered by the blood of the true Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach. Now, back to the winner of this year's marathon, Lawrence Chirono. The surname Chirono is Kalian, which is a Kenyan tribe of marathon runners. Among these marathon runners, Chirono means one who was born in the evening when sheep and cows were being taken home after grazing. This connects him to a shepherd, since a shepherd is the one who herds sheep or cows. The scriptures tell us that the Antichrist is a worthless shepherd. We find this in Zechariah chapter 11, verse 7, which declares, Woe to the idle shepherd that leaveth the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm, and upon his right eye. His arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. This description tells us that the Antichrist will receive a head wound that affects his right eye, leaving him with only one good eye. This is the reason for the one-eye symbolism we see used so often by occultists. This year's marathon winner is from Kenya, and interestingly enough, Barack Obama is of Kenyan descent as well. Apparently, his father, Barack Hussein Obama Sr. was born in Kenya.
Today I'm really coming as a brother, as a citizen of the world, as someone with a connection to Africa, to talk about the importance of what she's doing, but also to create a larger context for what's possible. You know, Kenya has made extraordinary strides in recent decades. A young Kenyan doesn't have to do what my grandfather did and serve a foreign master. A young Kenyan doesn't have to do what my father did and leave home in order to get an education.
Obama made reference to this during the White House Correspondents' Dinner when he linked himself to the Lion King.
Tonight, for the first time, I am releasing my official birth video. Let's take a look.
Through deductive reasoning, we can reach a logically certain conclusion concerning the evidence that we have been given. If all of the premises concerning these orchestrated events which I have presented point to and identify Obama as the Antichrist, then we can be certain that the conclusion reached is necessarily true. Or maybe I'm just a type of Don Quixote, jousting with windmills, imagining they're giants. Well, like David, I choose to slay giants. What about you? Amen. Shalom.